take a look at that beautiful indoor tomato harvest. And this harvest is just beginning. Guten Yardening, everybody. Well, my backdrop probably looks a little different than a lot of the other videos that we filmed this winter, where I had lots of great plants growing behind me. And there's very good reason for that. The weather has finally warmed up here in Zone 5, Wisconsin. And what that means for us is we can get outside, and all the plants that I had growing back here are now growing outside. They're hardening off in some cases. They're getting ready to go out where they're going to spend the entire summer. Remember, we're growing quite a few fruit trees here that can't endure a Zone 5 winter, and so we have to bring them in over that winter time. But when it's summertime, we're not going to leave them down here with this artificial light. We're going to get them outside, and we're going to get them growing. Remember, last season, our tangerine tree gave us 18 tangerines. So we're hopeful with a lot of the new fruit trees that we brought in, but we're going to get some great growth outdoors from those plants, regardless of whether we get fruit this season or not. But the reason we're in here right now is because we have to take care of a couple of things to wrap up our indoor growing season. Believe me, all winter long I've been thinking about getting back outdoors. As much as I enjoy gardening inside, it's not exactly the same. And so we have some tomatoes that are still in the early stages in here, and I'll show you those. But what I really want to get to is a final indoor harvest, because in our indoor raised bed, we have quite a few things that are still growing. So let's go ahead and wrap up our indoor growing season, and let's get to one final harvest. Now I got to keep this one kind of close to where we are. These aren't that far along. These are some of our tomatoes, but I will tell you, we have over 18 varieties started. You know, we did a video where we talked a little bit about maximizing what we're going to grow with our tomatoes and picking the kinds that we really want to focus on this year for different purposes. And so you should definitely go check out that video and look at some of our reasoning behind this and some of the cool varieties we're growing this year, because we have a whole bunch that are going to go out into our garden here in a couple of weeks. Now, in addition to those tomato plants that we just started a couple of weeks ago, you can see we have some that we planted a couple of months ago indoors, just in these grow bags. And we're going to take these outside, and you can see the beginnings on this one. We're about to see some blossoms, and on these two, we're already getting those nice first blossoms in here. And I think once we get these outside, they're going to really take off. Again, there's something about that natural light that is a big difference maker, and they'll also have access to more of that rainwater. So we've got some nice tomato plants here, and that brings us up to our raised bed, which is looking kind of cool with that purplish light. I'm actually going to turn that light off here so you can see things a little bit more naturally, but I'm going to talk about the difference in the lights here in just a second. But it looks kind of like an indoor edible forest, well, for the most part. Now, we have surrounding the exterior of this bed some tomatoes. We talked a little bit about growing tomatoes indoors and whether or not you could do it successfully, or what that process looked like in an earlier video. And I do want to talk a little bit about that because, you know, at the time these were pretty small plants, but I talked about how we knew it was possible. But interestingly enough, over this raised bed, we have two different lights. One of these is a full spectrum light, and I'll turn this one on again so you can see. This is just with half of it. You can see what it does there. It's kind of a bluish reddish light. And then the other one is this T5 light. So we have 8 T5 bulbs right there. And there's a pretty substantial difference between the tomato plants that are underneath this full spectrum light. And we'll put a link to this light in the description. It's a 2000 watt full spectrum light. There's a substantial difference between these tomatoes and the others. As you can see, these are less bushy, they're more straggly. They don't have the blossoms. I mean, they have a few blossoms here and there, but it's not really much production underneath that light. And underneath here, you can clearly see it's bushier. And it's not just about how bushy the plant is and how full it is. Take a look at the deep green color that we have here on this one. And then underneath the other one, I mean, you can see the difference. It's not just the lighting, it's a lighter green color. And if we go inside, we can actually see that there are tomatoes in here. Now I'm going to turn that light off one more time so you can see the natural color, so you can see what this looks like as I get in here and start harvesting some of these beautiful vine-ripe tomatoes grown indoors. And that looks spectacular. Now, I would argue that the taste of an indoor grown tomato is probably not as flavorful as one grown outdoors. Let's move back in here, see if we can get the light. But it's definitely better than a store-bought tomato for sure. I mean, take a look at these. That's just, can you imagine, middle of winter, February, March, you come inside, you're hungry for some fresh tomatoes, just go down, grab them from your indoor tomato plant. I had to come around to the other side here. It's a little bit darker back here, but all these tomatoes had, look at this. They were hanging down. Here's the ones that I just pulled from down on that side. All right, back to the light. Take a look at that beautiful indoor tomato harvest. And this harvest is just beginning. But I'm gonna point this out one more time. I like this light. We've done well with the Hydroplanet light, the T5. But for tomatoes, we definitely want this kind, just like this light brings. Big difference in terms of production. All right, we've got our tomatoes harvested. Let's see what else we've got growing in here. It's like a nice little radish right here, maybe another. Let's see. We got a couple of radishes right down in here that we planted not so long ago. We've had great success growing radishes indoors. They're such a simple vegetable to grow outdoors as well, and they're really, really easy. It's one of our favorites in terms of a fast vegetable to grow, because you can typically get great production. Take a look at this one. Within about a month, depending on the variety, month to a month and a half. And they can actually start pretty early as well, and you can have multiple crops. So we'll definitely be planting some more of these as we head outdoors. But we're gonna add this to our nice little harvest. But if we're talking greens, these are luscious, rich. Look at the deep green color on these. These are absolutely fantastic. And I think one of the things that's really nice is you can, in a small space like this, even in an indoor garden, you can take advantage of growing multiple varieties and enjoying some of that diversity of types. This is a beautiful curly leaf kale. Look at those purples in there. Just a fantastic color. So we're able to get, this last final harvest. I could technically, if I wanted to, I could leave these in here and they would continue growing. That wouldn't be a problem at all. But for now, we're just going to get as much of these out of here as we can. When we eat kale or we eat these greens, we don't eat them all right away. And one of the things that I think people probably worry about when they're growing something like kale is, how are you going to eat all of it without it going to waste? But we know that kale freezes really well. Typically for kale, what I do is I cut it off, cut the stem out, and you can definitely eat the stem. But one of the things we do with the stem is we feed it to our worms, because we know they actually like this really well, and then none of it goes to waste. If you don't like the stem, that's a great option. We've got so much delicious greenery here. This is multiple meals in here. Multiple fresh, organically grown. Here, let me just show you what I've got so far right there. Take a look at that. All of this from our last harvest. Now, because I intend this to be the last harvest, I'm cutting these back way more than I ever would if I was growing outside, for example. But I do want to show you down here in the middle just how much more growth is already coming in. So realistically, if we wanted to leave the lights on, keep things watered and fed down here, these would continue to grow. Now, before I show you the final harvest, I want you to do me a favor and try to guess what this is. What's this still growing here in our raised bed? Let us know in the comments what you think it is. All right, folks, take a look at this harvest. A ton of greens. Underneath here, we've got our tomatoes and our radishes. Well, one thing's for sure, we enjoy the fruits of our winter garden very much. And we're super excited to continue this process of our move toward self-sufficiency, of our move toward growing all of our own food here at Guten Yardening. Well, we hope you enjoyed this video today, and if you did, don't forget to give us a like, leave us a comment, remember to share and subscribe, and most importantly, remember, when you're with us, you are good to grow.